Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the USS Vengeance, staring at the twisted wreckage that had once been Kepler Station. The research outpost floated dead in space, its hull torn open like a broken egg. Bodies drifted in the vacuum, frozen and still. Men, women, children, all dead. Jesus Christ, whispered Lieutenant Amy Carter from her position at the sensor station. Her face was pale as she read the data streams. Captain, there are no life signs. Nothing. The entire station is gone. Morrison felt his stomach drop. Kepler Station had been home to 8,000 people. Scientists, engineers, their families. It was humanity's furthest outpost, a peaceful research facility studying alien plant life. Now it was a graveyard. Take us closer, Morrison ordered. His voice was steady, but his hands shook slightly. I want to know what happened here. The Vengeance moved slowly through the debris field. Chunks of metal and plastic bumped against the ship's hull. Morrison could see through the bridge windows as they passed a section of the station's residential area. Furniture floated in the void. A child's toy spaceship tumbled end over end, its paint bright against the darkness. Commander Rick Stone, Morrison's second in command, pulled up the station's last transmission logs. Sir, the final message was sent 6 hours ago. It was a distress call. They said they were under attack by unknown ships. Unknown ships? Morrison turned to look at Stone. What kind of ships? The message was cut off before they could give details. But Captain, there's something else. Stone's voice was grim. The attack patterns on the hull, they're not random. Someone did this on purpose. They wanted to cause maximum damage and suffering. Lieutenant Carter gasped from her station. Captain, I'm picking up a data packet from one of the station's security cameras. It's still transmitting on emergency power. Put it on screen, Morrison said. The main display flickered to life. The security footage was grainy and broken, but clear enough to see what had happened. Alien soldiers in dark armor moved through the station's corridors. They were tall and thin with forearms and elongated heads. Morrison had never seen their species before. The aliens weren't just killing. They were taking their time. The footage showed them dragging human families from their homes. Children screamed for their parents. The aliens seemed to enjoy the fear. Some of them were recording the massacre with small devices. Fast forward, Morrison said quietly. His jaw was clenched tight. The footage jumped ahead. The aliens had gathered, the surviving humans in the station's main plaza. There were maybe 1,000 people left, huddled together in terror. Morrison could see scientists he recognized. Dr. Peters from the botany department, Engineer Williams and his young wife, and then he saw her. His sister Lisa, Dr. Lisa Morrison, stood near the front of the crowd, her lab coat torn and dirty. She was trying to shield a group of children behind her. Even facing death, she was protecting others. That was just like her. The alien commander stepped forward. It was taller than the others, with decorative markings on its armor. It began to speak in its own language, harsh and guttural. The translation software kicked in a moment later. Humans, the alien said. You are insects. Vermin. You spread through space like a disease, claiming worlds that belong to superior species. Today, the Zephyrian Empire begins your extermination. We will broadcast this across our territory so all may see how we deal with inferior life. Morrison's hands gripped the armrests of his command chair so hard his knuckles turned white. Zephyrians. He had heard of them, but humanity had never made contact. They controlled a large section of space several hundred light-years away. The Zephyrian commander raised one of its forearms. Its soldiers began firing into the crowd, but they didn't kill quickly. The weapons were set to wound, to cause pain. The humans fell screaming. The aliens moved among them, finishing some off while keeping others alive to suffer longer. They were savoring it. Morrison watched his sister die. A Zephyrian soldier grabbed her as she tried to protect the children. It said something that made the other aliens laugh. Then it slowly pressed its weapon against her head and fired. Lisa's body went limp and fell to the floor. Turn it off, Morrison said. His voice was barely above a whisper. Sir, there's more. Carter said. The footage continues for another 2 hours. They experimented on some of the survivors, and they broadcast everything back to their empire. This was entertainment for them. Morrison stood up slowly. Around the bridge, his crew watched him in silence. They had all seen what happened. They all understood what this meant. Commander Stone, get me Admiral Cross at Earth Command. Priority 1. Morrison's voice was different now. Colder. Lieutenant Carter, I want a full analysis of everything we've found here. Every piece of data. Every fragment of that footage. I want to know everything about these Zephyrians. Yes, sir, Carter replied. Captain, what are we going to do? Morrison looked back at the screen, which now showed the empty plaza where his sister had died. The bodies were gone, either vaporized or blown into space. Nothing remained but bloodstains on the metal floor. We're going to make sure this never happens again, he said. The communication system chimed. Admiral Helen Cross appeared on the screen, her lined face serious. She was an old soldier, a veteran of the border wars with the pirates of Vega. But Morrison could see that even she was shaken. Jake, I'm sorry, she said. We just received your preliminary report. Are you certain there are no survivors? None, Admiral. 8,000 people, all dead. Cross nodded grimly. I have more bad news. Kepler Station wasn't the only attack. We've lost 12 colonies in the past week. The pattern is always the same. Total extermination, broadcast across Zephyrian space. They're calling it the Great Cleansing. Morrison felt the blood drain from his face. 12 colonies? How many people? Over 2 million humans, Jake. Men, women, children, all dead. And according to our intelligence, this is just the beginning. The Zephyrians have declared us an inferior species. They plan to wipe out every human in the galaxy. The bridge was dead silent. Morrison could hear the hum of the ship's engines, the quiet beeping of the computer systems, normal sounds of a functioning starship. But nothing felt normal anymore. What are our orders, Admiral? Morrison asked. Cross was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was hard as steel. The Colonial Defense Force is mobilizing every ship we have. We're not going to let them kill us without a fight, but Jake, this isn't going to be a normal war. They've shown us what they think of mercy, of human life. We can't respond the same way we would to a civilized enemy. Morrison understood. The Zephyrians had made this personal. They had turned murder into entertainment. They had broadcast the deaths of human children across their empire for fun. I'll need to brief my senior staff, Morrison said. When do we begin operations? Soon. Very soon. And Jake? I'm sorry about Lisa. She was a good woman. The communication ended. Morrison stood alone on the bridge for a moment, looking out at the wreckage of Kepler Station. Somewhere in that debris field were the remains of his sister and 8,000 other innocent people. He called his senior staff to the conference room. Commander Stone, Lieutenant Carter, Chief Medical Officer, Dr. Karen White, and Chief Engineer Ben Davis gathered around the table. They all looked shaken by what they had witnessed. You've all seen the footage, Morrison began. You know what we're dealing with. The Zephyrians don't just want to defeat us, they want to exterminate us for sport. They think we're animals. Dr. White, a small woman with graying hair, spoke first. Captain, the psychological profiles I've been able to gather suggest the Zephyrians see violence as entertainment. They're not just warriors, they're sadists. Which means, Engineer Davis added, they expect us to respond emotionally. They want us to be angry, to be chaotic. That's what they understand. Morrison nodded slowly. An idea was forming in his mind. A terrible, necessary idea. What if we don't give them what they expect? He said quietly. What if we show them something they've never seen before? The room was silent. Morrison looked at each of his officers in turn. They want to see us as animals. Instead, we show them that humans can be something far worse than any animal. We show them that we can be perfectly, methodically, ruthlessly efficient, and we make sure that every single Zephyrian in the galaxy, knows exactly what happens when you murder human children for fun. Commander Stone leaned forward. What are you suggesting, Captain? Morrison's eyes were cold as empty space. We're going to teach the galaxy a lesson about human mercy. We're going to leave one alive, just one, so they never forget what we're capable of when they push us too far. 6 months had passed since Kepler Station died. 6 months of preparation, of planning, of humanity learning to think like something it had never been before. The Colonial Defense Force no longer existed. In its place stood the Human Retribution Fleet, and Commodore Jake Morrison commanded its first strike force. The bridge of the USS Nemesis was quieter than military ships used to be. The crew spoke in whispers and moved with careful precision. They had trained for this moment every day since the massacre. They knew exactly what they were going to do. Zarian Prime is in visual range, sir, reported Lieutenant Amy Carter from her station. She had grown thinner in the past months, her face harder. The footage from Kepler Station played in her dreams every night. Morrison looked at the main screen. Zarian Prime was a mining world, home to 50 million Zephyrians. It had 3 moons and a ring system made of processed metals. The planet's cities glowed bright against the dark surface. It looked peaceful, beautiful even. Remember what we learned about this place, Morrison said to his crew. When the footage of Kepler Station was broadcast, the population of Zarian Prime held celebrations. They cheered when they watched human children die. They requested more broadcasts. The bridge crew said nothing, but Morrison could see their faces harden. Dr. Karen White, now serving as the fleet's xenobiologist, had spent months studying Zephyrian psychology and culture. What she found had made everyone sick. Commander Stone, begin Phase 1, Morrison ordered. Rick Stone nodded and activated the fleet communications. Around Zarian Prime, 30 human warships moved into position. They had been waiting in the outer system for hours, hidden behind the gas giants' moons. The Zephyrian defense platforms never saw them coming. The attack was nothing like the chaotic raids that humanity had fought before. There was no rush, no desperate charge into enemy fire. The human ships moved like surgeons, cutting away the planet's defenses piece by piece. Orbital weapons platforms died in silent flashes of light. Communication satellites went dark. The defensive fleet tried to respond, but they were overwhelmed in minutes. Defense grid is down, reported Commander Stone. All enemy ships destroyed. No human casualties. Morrison nodded. Begin Phase 2. Colonel Turner, are your Marines ready? On another screen, Colonel Mike Turner appeared. He was aboard one of the assault ships, his face painted with combat stripes. Behind him, Morrison could see rows of human Marines in full armor. They looked like death machines. We're ready, Commodore. Dropships are loaded and waiting. Remember the rules, Colonel. Military targets first, government buildings, command centers, communications. Leave the civilian areas untouched for now. Understood, sir. We know the plan. The dropships launched like falling stars. Morrison watched them descend through Zarian Prime's atmosphere, their heat shields glowing, bright orange. Within an hour, they had landed near every major city on the planet. The ground assault was as precise as the space battle. Human Marines moved through the cities like ghosts, striking only military installations. They didn't shoot civilians who ran screaming through the streets. They didn't destroy homes or schools. They were hunting bigger prey. Phase 2 complete, Turner reported 3 hours later. All military installations secured, government leaders captured. The planet's communication network is under our control. Morrison stood up from his command chair. Begin Phase 3. Dr. White, are you ready? Karen White appeared on screen from the medical bay. She looked tired but determined. The psychological conditioning equipment is prepared. We've identified our target. The target was Vextal, a young Zephyrian military commander who had been captured during the assault. He was perfect for their purposes. Young enough to live for decades, high-ranking enough to be believed, and according to Dr. White's analysis, psychologically suited to carry their message. Bring him to the surface, Morrison ordered. I want him to see everything. The shuttle ride down to Zarian Prime was quiet. Morrison, Dr. White, Lieutenant Carter, and 6 Marines accompanied the Zephyrian prisoner. Vextal sat in restraints, his forearms bound behind him, his elongated head turned constantly, trying to see through the shuttle's windows. They landed in the capital city's main plaza. It was the same type of plaza where Morrison's sister had died on Kepler Station. The similarity was not accidental. 50 million Zephyrians had been gathered in locations across the planet. They stood in groups surrounded by human Marines but not harmed. They looked confused and terrified. Some were crying. Others stood in shocked silence. Morrison walked Vextal to a platform in the center of the plaza. The Zephyrian commander looked out at his people, then up at Morrison. "What do you want, human?" Vextal asked in accented but clear English. "If you plan to kill us, then do it. Don't drag this out." Morrison studied the alien's face. Zephyrians were hard to read, but he could see fear in the creature's large black eyes. Good. Fear was the beginning of understanding. "Tell me, Vextal," Morrison said quietly. "Do you know what happened at Kepler Station?" The Zephyrian's head moved in what might have been a nod. "It was a military action. The beginning of the Great Cleansing. Your species was declared inferior and marked for elimination. Military action." Morrison repeated the words slowly. "Is that what you call the torture and murder of children? Is that what you call making entertainment from human suffering?" Vextal said nothing, but Morrison could see him thinking. The alien was beginning to understand that this wasn't going to be a normal execution. Your people cheered when they watched the footage, Morrison continued. They celebrated the deaths of human families. They requested more broadcasts. Do you deny this? "No," Vextal said quietly. We did not see you as people. We saw you as animals. Pests to be removed." Morrison nodded. "I understand. And now you're going to learn something about these animals." He gestured to Lieutenant Carter, who activated a portable communication system. Suddenly, every Zephyrian on the planet could hear Morrison's voice. "People of Zarian Prime," Morrison said. 6 months ago, your military attacked human colonies. You murdered 2 million innocent people. You tortured children. You broadcast their deaths for entertainment. You celebrated their suffering. The crowd of aliens stirred nervously. Some tried to move away, but the human Marines kept them in place. "Today," Morrison continued, "you will learn about human mercy." He nodded to Dr. White, who pressed a button on her medical scanner. Across the planet, the Zephyrian civilians began to collapse. They fell quietly, without pain or fear. Dr. White's sedative gas was designed to be peaceful. The aliens simply went to sleep and never woke up. In 15 minutes, 49,999,999 Zephyrians were dead. Only Vextal remained conscious. The young commander stared in horror at the bodies of his people. They lay peacefully in the plazas and streets as if they had simply decided to take a nap. There was no blood, no signs of violence. They looked almost serene. "Why?" Vextal whispered. "Why didn't you kill me too?" Morrison walked closer to the alien. "Because you have a job to do." Dr. White approached with her medical equipment. "This won't hurt," she told Vextal, "but you need to remember everything perfectly." The memory conditioning process took 2 hours. Dr. White used a combination of neural stimulation and psychological techniques to burn every detail of the day into Vextal's mind. The alien would never forget what he had seen. He would never be able to lie about it or distort it. The memories would be as clear and permanent as scars. When it was finished, Morrison knelt down next to the Zephyrian commander. "Listen to me very carefully," Morrison said. "You are going to return to your empire. You are going to tell them exactly what happened here. You are going to tell them that humanity shows mercy. We could have made your people suffer as you made ours suffer. We could have tortured them for hours, broadcast their deaths across space, celebrated their pain." Vextal's eyes were wide with shock and fear. "But we didn't," Morrison continued. "We gave them peace. We let them die without fear or pain. That is human mercy. Do you understand? The alien nodded slowly. Good. Now here is what you must remember, above all else. Morrison's voice became cold as deep space. We left you alive not because we are kind. We left you alive so you can tell the galaxy what happens when someone makes an enemy of humanity. We left you alive so your people will know that our mercy is a choice, not a weakness. Morrison stood up and looked down at the broken alien. Every world that attacks us will end the same way. Total destruction. One survivor. The same message. We will not be angry. We will not be chaotic. We will be precise, methodical, and absolutely final. And we will always leave one alive so the galaxy never forgets our wrath. Lieutenant Carter had prepared Vextal's ship. It was a small, fast courier vessel, barely damaged in the attack. The alien climbed aboard with shaking hands. Why? One? Vextal asked before closing the hatch. Why always leave one alive? Morrison smiled, but there was no warmth in it. Because dead men tell no tales. But broken men? They tell the most important tales of all. The ship lifted off and disappeared into hyperspace. Morrison watched it. Go then turned to survey the silent city. 50 million Zephyrians lay peaceful in death around him. Vextal's ship dropped out of hyperspace near Zephyr Magnus, the capital world of the Zephyrian Empire. His hand shook as he guided the small vessel toward the planet. 3 weeks had passed since Zarian Prime, but the memories were as fresh, as if they had happened moments ago. Dr. White's conditioning had worked perfectly. The Imperial fleet surrounded his ship immediately. Dozens of warships, their weapons trained on his tiny courier vessel. Vextal activated his communication system with trembling fingers. This is Commander Vextal of the Zarion Defense Force, he said. I request immediate audience with the High Council. I carry urgent intelligence about the human response to our military actions. There was a long pause. Then a voice crackled through the speakers. Commander Vextal, you were reported missing when Zarion Prime went silent. What is your status? Vextal closed his eyes. The words came out in a whisper. Zarion Prime is gone. Everyone is dead. I am the only survivor. The escort ships guided him to the Imperial landing bay. Within an hour, Vextal found himself standing before the Zephyrian High Council. 12 ancient aliens sat in a semicircle, their forearms folded, their black eyes studying him with suspicion. Emperor Zixthon sat at the center, his ceremonial armor gleaming under the chamber's lights. He was old even by Zephyrian standards, his skin pale and marked with scars from a dozen wars. He had ruled the Empire for over 2 centuries. Speak, the Emperor commanded. Tell us what happened to Zarion Prime. Vextal's voice cracked as he began. The humans came without warning. 30 ships. They destroyed our defenses in minutes. Not one of our vessels survived. Then they landed Marines. And? Emperor Zixthon leaned forward. How many humans died in the battle? None, Vextal whispered. Not a single human casualty. The council members looked at each other with confusion. This was not how wars were supposed to work. Battles had casualties on both sides. That was the nature of conflict. Continue, the Emperor said slowly. They gathered all 50 million of our people in the cities. They didn't hurt anyone at first, they just collected them like they were counting livestock. Vextal's voice grew stronger as the conditioned memories took over. Then their leader spoke to me, a human called Morrison. What did he say? He asked if I knew about Kepler Station, about the Great Cleansing. When I confirmed our military actions, he said I was going to learn about human mercy. Emperor Zixthon's eyes narrowed. Mercy? They showed mercy to our people? In a way. Vextal's whole body began to shake. They killed everyone, all 50 million Zephyrians on Zarion Prime, but they did it gently. No pain, no fear. The people just went to sleep and never woke up. It was over in 15 minutes. The chamber fell silent. This was not what any of them had expected. The Zephyrian way of war involved suffering, terror, the slow destruction of enemies. Quick, painless death was not mercy to them. It was something else entirely. Why did they spare you? Asked Council Member Drexval. To deliver a message. Vexatal straightened, and when he spoke again, his voice carried Morrison's exact words, burned into his memory by Dr. White's machines. Humanity shows mercy. They could have made our people suffer as we made theirs suffer. They could have tortured them for hours, broadcast their deaths across space, celebrated their pain, but they didn't. They gave them peace. The Emperor stood up from his throne. That is not mercy, that is efficiency. There's more, Vextal continued. Morrison said they left me alive so I could tell the galaxy what happens when someone makes an enemy of humanity. He said their mercy is a choice, not a weakness. Every world that attacks them will end the same way. Total destruction. One survivor. The same message. Council member Thaisara spoke up. This makes no tactical sense. Why warn us? Why not simply continue their attacks? Vextal looked directly at her. Because they want us to be afraid. They want us to understand that they could have been cruel, but chose not to be. They want us to know that 50 million of our people died not from hatred, but from human calculation. The room was quiet for a long time. Finally, Emperor Zixthan spoke. You will repeat this testimony for broadcast across our empire. Our people need to know what we face. The broadcast went out that evening. Vextal stood before the Imperial cameras and told his story again, word for word. Every Zephyrian world received the transmission. Every citizen heard about Zerion Prime, and the humans who killed with perfect precision and spared with perfect restraint. The psychological impact was immediate and devastating. Zephyrians understood cruelty. They understood rage and hatred and the desire for revenge. These were emotions they could fight against, tactics they could counter. But humanity's response was something completely alien to them. The humans had shown perfect control. They had demonstrated that their violence was not born of anger but of choice. They had proven that they could be merciful when they wanted to be, which made their decision not to show mercy far more terrifying than any massacre. 3 days after Vextal's broadcast, Captain Sarah Blake received new orders aboard the USS Retribution. She was to lead the second wave of attacks against Zephyrian targets. The pattern would be identical to Zerion Prime. Total destruction. One survivor. The same message. Her target was Nexus 7, a Zephyrian colony world with 12 million inhabitants. It was a military supply depot, the kind of target that would have clear strategic value. But more importantly, it was another chance to reinforce humanity's message. The attack followed the same pattern as Zerion Prime. Perfect execution, 0 human casualties, complete destruction of all defenses. Captain Blake's Marines landed and secured the planet in hours. But this time, something was different. The Zephyrians didn't fight as hard. Some of them surrendered immediately when they saw human soldiers. Others tried to run rather than resist. Word of Zerion Prime had already reached them. Captain Blake chose her survivor carefully, a logistics officer named Kethvol, young enough to live for decades, respected enough to be believed. Dr. White's psychological conditioning burned the memories into his mind, just as it had with Vextal. 12 million Zephyrians died peacefully, in their sleep. One lived to carry the message home. A month later, it was Outpost Gamma, then the shipyards at Helios Station, then the mining facilities on Korath 9. Each attack followed the same pattern. Each time, one survivor returned to tell the same story. The effect rippled across the galaxy far beyond Zephyrian space. On the bridge of the USS Nemesis, Morrison studied intelligence reports from across known space. Other alien species were taking notice of humanity's war with the Zephyrians. The reactions were not what anyone had expected. "Sir," Lieutenant Carter reported, "we're receiving diplomatic transmissions from 17 different species. Most of them are requests for non-aggression pacts." Morrison raised an eyebrow. 17? Which species? The Mantari Confederation, the Stellar Dominion, the Hegemony of Suns, the Trade Federation of Outer Worlds. Carter read from her list. Even some species we've never had contact with are reaching out. Commander Stone looked up from his tactical display. "It seems word of the Mercy Protocol is spreading faster than we expected." Dr. White appeared on screen from the medical bay. "I've been analyzing the psychological profiles of various species. The protocol is having effects we didn't anticipate. Species that were planning attacks on human space are reconsidering. The galaxy is starting to see us very differently." Morrison nodded slowly. "How so?" "Before, we were seen as a young species. Weak, disorganized, easy targets. Now," Dr. White paused. "Now they see us as something they can't understand or predict. A species that kills with perfect precision and shows mercy as a weapon. Any species still planning attacks? The Zephyrian Empire is mobilizing their remaining fleets for a massive assault. But everyone else is being very careful about their interactions with us." Morrison walked to the bridge windows and looked out at the stars. In the distance, he could see other human ships. The Retribution fleet had grown to over 200 vessels. Humanity was mobilizing like never before. "What about the Vorthan Collective?" Morrison asked. Intelligence suggested they were considering an alliance with the Zephyrians. Carter checked her reports. "They withdrew from all negotiations with the Zephyrians yesterday. They're now requesting formal diplomatic contact with Earth and the Raider clans of the Outer Rim. Complete radio silence. They've stopped all attacks on human shipping routes." Morrison smiled grimly. The Mercy Protocol was working better than they had hoped. By demonstrating perfect control and calculated mercy, humanity had made itself more feared than species who relied on simple brutality. Engineer Ben Davis joined the conversation from the engine room. "Sir, I've been monitoring communications across multiple species. There's a pattern emerging in how they talk about us." "What kind of pattern?" "They're not calling us warriors or soldiers anymore. They're calling us the humans who choose. The species that could show mercy to all but decides not to. It's become our reputation across the galaxy." Dr. White nodded. "The psychological impact is exactly what we hoped for. By leaving one survivor each time, we're forcing entire civilizations to confront the fact that our violence is a choice, not a compulsion. That makes us far more frightening than any species that simply kills everything." The alarm klaxons echoed through Earth Defense Command as Admiral Helen Cross watched the tactical display with grim satisfaction. Thousands of red dots moved through hyperspace toward the Sol system. The entire remaining Zephyrian fleet, over 8,000 ships, was coming to end the war at humanity's doorstep. "Admiral," reported Commander Lisa Jones from her station. "Long-range sensors confirm the enemy fleet composition. Battlecruisers, dreadnoughts, carrier groups. Everything they have left." Cross nodded. She was an old woman now, her hair completely gray, her face lined with the stress of commanding humanity's war effort. But her eyes were sharp as steel. "Estimated arrival time?" 18 hours at current speed. They're not trying to hide their approach." "Good. Let them come openly. It makes this easier." Cross activated the fleet communication system. "All ships, this is Admiral Cross. Execute Defense Plan Omega. Take your positions." Across the Sol system, the human Retribution fleet moved into formation. 200 warships, including Commodore Morrison's flagship USS Nemesis, positioned themselves between Earth and the approaching enemy. But these weren't the same desperate defense forces that might have fought this battle a year ago. Humanity had learned to think differently about war. On the bridge of the Nemesis, Morrison studied the tactical displays with his senior staff. The Zephyrian fleet was massive, easily 4 times the size of the human force. In any normal battle, those odds would be impossible, but this wasn't going to be a normal battle. "Dr. White," Morrison said, "what's your analysis of Zephyrian psychology going into this engagement?" The xenobiologist appeared on screen from her laboratory. Her equipment had been upgraded over the past months, and she now had detailed psychological profiles of every major alien species in the galaxy. "They're desperate," she reported. "Emperor Zixthan believes that attacking Earth will force us to respond emotionally. He thinks our calculated approach will break down when we're defending our homeworld. He expects us to fight like cornered animals. And when we don't? Complete psychological collapse. The Zephyrians have built their entire military doctrine around the idea that all species become irrational when truly threatened. When we prove that wrong, it will destroy their ability to understand or counter us. Lieutenant Carter looked up from her communications station. Commodore, we're receiving a transmission from the Zephyrian flagship. Emperor Zixthan wants to speak with you directly. Morrison straightened his uniform. Put him through. The main screen flickered and Emperor Zixthan appeared. The ancient Zephyrian looked older than Morrison remembered from intelligence photos. His 4 arms trembled slightly, and his black eyes held a mixture of rage and desperation. Human commander, the Emperor said, I am Zixthan, ruler of the Zephyrian Empire. I come to end this madness. Emperor, Morrison replied calmly. I am Commodore Morrison of the Human Retribution Fleet. I assume you're here to surrender. Zixthan's eyes widened. Surrender? You face the full might of my empire. 8,000 ships against your pitiful 200. When we are finished, your homeworld will burn and your species will be extinct. Morrison's expression didn't change. Is that what you think is going to happen? I know it. Your cold calculations, your precise little murders, they mean nothing. Here, when we threaten your birth world, you will fight like the animals you are, and animals can be defeated. Morrison almost smiled. The Emperor still didn't understand. Even now, facing the complete destruction of his empire, Zixthan couldn't comprehend what humanity had become. Emperor, let me explain something to you, Morrison said quietly. You attacked our colonies because you thought we were weak. When we responded with the Mercy Protocol, you thought it was just another form of warfare. Now you come to Earth believing that threatening our homeworld will make us emotional and stupid. It will. All species break when their survival is threatened. All species except one. Morrison's voice grew colder. We're going to destroy your entire fleet, Emperor. Every ship, every soldier, and we're going to leave you alive to watch it happen. The transmission ended. Morrison turned to his crew. All ships, begin the engagement. Remember the plan. No unnecessary risks, no heroic charges. We execute this perfectly, step by step. The Battle of Earth began not with desperate charges or emotional speeches, but with mathematical precision. The human fleet didn't rush forward to meet the Zephyrians. Instead, they fell back in carefully planned formations, drawing the enemy deeper into the Sol system. The Zephyrians, expecting fierce resistance, found themselves facing a fighting withdrawal that made no tactical sense. Enemy fleet is pursuing, as expected, reported Commander Stone from the tactical station. They're maintaining formation but showing signs of confusion. Morrison watched the display. The Zephyrian ships were spread across millions of kilometers, their formation loose and overconfident. They had expected to face desperate human defenders. Instead, they were chasing a fleet that seemed to be retreating. Phase 2, Morrison ordered. Captain Frank Miller's heavy cruiser squadron emerged from behind Luna, striking the Zephyrian left flank with perfect timing. At the same moment, Captain Lisa Jones led her destroyer group up from the asteroid belt, hitting the enemy's rear formations. The attacks weren't random or emotional. Every shot was calculated, every maneuver planned months in advance. Human ships struck like surgical instruments, destroying key enemy vessels and disappearing before the Zephyrians could respond effectively. Enemy fleet is fragmenting, Stone reported. They're trying to reform, but our hit-and-run tactics are preventing coordination. Morrison nodded. This was exactly what Dr. White had predicted. The Zephyrians were used to brutal, straightforward battles. They didn't know how to respond to an enemy that fought like a computer program. Begin Phase 3. Major Scott, are your Marine units ready? Major Angela Scott appeared on screen from her assault ship. Behind her, Morrison could see hundreds of human Marines in combat armor. Ready for boarding actions, Commodore. We've identified the command ships. Execute. While the space battle raged around them, human assault teams launched toward specific Zephyrian vessels. Not to destroy them, but to capture them. The Marines moved through enemy ships like ghosts, neutralizing crew members with stunning precision. Within 2 hours, humanity had captured 12 Zephyrian command vessels, including 3 that contained high-ranking officers. The boarding actions weren't about gathering intelligence. They were about demonstrating that humans could take whatever They wanted whenever they wanted. Enemy morale is collapsing, reported Lieutenant Carter. We're intercepting communications between their ships. Many are requesting permission to withdraw. Denied, came Emperor Zixthan's voice over the captured communications. No retreat, no surrender. Fight until every ship is destroyed. Morrison, watched the tactical display as the Zephyrian fleet continued to fracture. Ships broke formation, some trying to flee, others charging forward in desperate attacks. The careful coordination they had maintained at the beginning of the battle was completely gone. Final phase, Morrison announced. All ships, converge on the Emperor's flagship. Time to end this. The USS Nemesis led the final assault. The remaining, human fleet surrounded the Emperor's massive dreadnought, the pride of Zephyr Magnus. It was the largest ship in the Zephyrian fleet, over 5 kilometers long and bristling with weapons. But size meant nothing against perfect tactical coordination. Human ships struck the dreadnought from every angle, their weapons targeting specific systems with surgical precision. The ship's weapons went offline first, then its engines, then its shields. Within 30 minutes, the pride of Zephyr Magnus was a floating hulk. Around it, the rest of the Zephyrian fleet was dying. Morrison watched as the last enemy ships were systematically destroyed. There was no glory in it, no excitement. Just the methodical elimination of a threat to human survival. Commodore, reported Commander Stone, all enemy vessels have been destroyed except the flagship. We're reading minimal life signs aboard the pride of Zephyr Magnus. Prepare a boarding team, Morrison ordered. I want Emperor Zixthan brought to me alive. The boarding action was swift and efficient. Human Marines moved through the damaged dreadnought, finding bodies floating in the corridors. Most of the Zephyrian crew was dead, killed when their ship's life support failed. But in the command center they found Emperor Zixthan. The ancient alien sat slumped in his command throne, his 4 arms hanging limply at his sides. He was alive, but barely. His eyes stared at nothing, seeing visions of his dead empire. Colonel Mike Turner personally escorted the Emperor to Morrison's ship. They met in the Nemesis's conference room, the same place where Morrison had first planned the Mercy. Protocol Zixthan looked up at Morrison with empty eyes. You destroyed them all. 8,000 ships, 2 million of my people. All dead. Yes, Morrison said simply. How? We outnumbered you 4-1. We had superior firepower, better positioning. How did you defeat us so completely? Morrison sat down across from the broken Emperor. Because you still don't understand what we are. You came here expecting us to fight like animals when our home was threatened. You thought we would be emotional, desperate, easy to predict. All species fight that way. Emperor Zixthan's ship arrived at Zephyr Magnus 3 weeks after the Battle of Earth. The ancient alien sat alone in the cockpit, staring at his homeworld through the viewports. The planet looked the same as always. Beautiful blue oceans, white, clouds, gleaming cities. But he knew the truth. Every city was empty. Every street was silent. Every building stood as a monument to the dead. The planetary defense grid should have challenged his approach, but no signals came. The orbital stations hung dark and powerless in space. Zixthan guided his small ship down to the imperial capital, landing in the same plaza where he had once reviewed massive military parades. Now bodies lay everywhere, peaceful in death. His people looked as though they had simply decided to sleep. There was no blood, no signs of struggle. The humans had kept their promise. They had given the Zephyrians mercy in their final moments. Zixthan walked through the empty palace, his footsteps echoing in the silent halls. In the throne room he found the bodies of his advisors, his generals, his family, all dead, all peaceful, all victims of humanity's terrible mercy. He activated the Imperial broadcasting system with shaking hands. Across what remained of Zephyrian space, a few scattered outposts and research stations received his final transmission. This is Emperor Zixthan, he said, his voice breaking. I speak to you from the ruins of our empire. The humans have won, not through rage or hatred, but through something far worse. They have shown us that mercy and wrath are both choices for them, and they chose to end us completely. His voice grew stronger as he continued, driven by the psychological conditioning that Dr. White had burned into his mind during his brief captivity. Let this be known throughout the galaxy. Humanity does not fight like other species. They do not become emotional when threatened. They do not make mistakes when angry. They are perfect in their violence and perfect in their restraint. They left me alive not from kindness, but so the universe would know what they are capable. How the transmission ended. Zixthon slumped in his throne, the last living member of a species that had once ruled dozens of star systems. He would live for many years still, a walking reminder of what happened when someone made an enemy of humanity. Meanwhile, on Earth, Admiral Morrison stood before the United Nations General Assembly. The Great Hall was packed with representatives from every human colony, every space station, every outpost. But there were others present too. Alien ambassadors sat in specially constructed galleries, watching humanity's leadership with a mixture of fear and respect. Morrison wore his dress, uniform, the ribbons on his chest telling the story of humanity's transformation from victims to victors. But his face showed no pride, no satisfaction. He looked like a man who had done a necessary job and wanted to move on. The war with the Zephyrian Empire is over, Morrison announced. Their military capacity has been eliminated. Their population has been reduced to one individual. The threat to human space has ended. Secretary General Patricia Wells, the leader of Earth's government, stood to address the assembly. Admiral Morrison, can you explain to this body how the Mercy Protocol achieved victory with minimal human casualties? Morrison nodded. The protocol worked because it targeted the enemy's psychology rather than just their military assets. By demonstrating perfect control and calculated mercy, we created a weapon that was more effective than any bomb or missile. An alien ambassador raised one of its tentacles. Morrison recognized the being as a representative of the Mantari Confederation, a species that had once considered attacking human colonies. Admiral Morrison, the alien said through its translator, my government wishes to understand the human concept of mercy as a weapon. How can kindness be used for warfare? Morrison looked directly at the creature. It's not kindness. True mercy comes from a position of absolute power. When you have the ability to destroy someone completely and choose not to, that demonstrates control. When you kill 49 million people and spare one, you're not being merciful. You're being terrifying. Another alien, this one from the Stellar Dominion, spoke up. But why leave survivors at all? Dead enemies cannot report your capabilities. Dead enemies tell no tales, Morrison agreed. But broken enemies tell the most important tales of all. Each survivor carried a message that was more effective than any propaganda or threat. They proved that humanity's violence was a choice, not a compulsion. Dr. Karen White joined Morrison at the podium. She had been promoted to Director of Xenopsychological Warfare, a new position created specifically for her expertise. The protocol works because it challenges the fundamental assumptions that most species have about conflict, she explained. They expect violence to be emotional, chaotic, driven by anger or fear. When they encounter a species that treats violence like mathematics, they have no framework for understanding or countering it. Secretary General Wells addressed the alien ambassadors directly. Honored representatives, humanity wants you to understand our position clearly. We did not start this war. We responded to genocide with precision and restraint. We have no desire to conquer or subjugate other species. A representative of the hegemony of suns, a collection of merchant worlds, asked the obvious question. What are humanity's intentions going forward? Will you expand your territory? Morrison answered. Humanity will defend itself. We will honor our treaties and agreements. We will trade freely with all peaceful species. But we will never again allow another civilization to see us as easy targets. And if someone attacks human space? Morrison's expression didn't change, but every alien in the room felt a chill. They will discover that the Mercy Protocol was actually mercy. Future aggressors will not receive the consideration we showed the Zephyrians. Lieutenant Amy Carter, now serving as Earth's first Director of Galactic Relations, stepped forward with a data pad. We've received formal diplomatic requests from 47 different species in the past month. Non-aggression pacts, trade, agreements, mutual defense treaties. The galaxy wants to be our friend now. Morrison almost smiled at that. 6 months ago, humanity had been seen as a minor species, suitable for genocide and entertainment. Now entire civilizations were sending gifts and requesting formal alliances. There's more, Carter continued. 3 different species have asked if we would serve as mediators in their territorial disputes. They believe human judgment would force impartial. Secretary General Wells looked surprised. They want us to judge their conflicts? They want species that can make decisions without emotion, Dr. White explained. Humanity's reputation for calculated thinking has spread across the galaxy. We're seen as the species that can be trusted to be fair because we don't let feelings cloud our judgment. Morrison walked to the great windows of the UN building, looking out at the city below. New York looked the same as it had before the war, but everything had changed. Humanity was no longer just another species struggling to survive in a hostile galaxy. They had become something unique. "Admiral," asked a human reporter, "do you believe the Mercy Protocol will prevent future wars?" Morrison considered the question carefully. "The protocol has established humanity's reputation. Other species now understand that attacking us carries consequences they can't predict or counter. Will that prevent all future conflicts? Probably not. But it will make any potential aggressor think very carefully about the cost." An alien ambassador from a species Morrison didn't recognize stood up. "Admiral, my people have a question about human nature. Are all humans capable of the calculation you demonstrated during this war?" Morrison looked at the creature for a long moment. "Every human is capable of making choices based on logic rather than emotion. Every human can decide to show mercy or wrath based on circumstances rather than feelings. That's what makes us human." The ambassador sat down without another word. Dr. White addressed the assembly one final time. "The galaxy has learned that humanity's greatest strength was never our technology or our numbers. It was our ability to remain rational under pressure. Other species become more emotional when threatened. We become more precise." As the session ended, Morrison found himself walking through the halls of the UN building alongside Ambassador Kretal of the Vorthan Collective. The alien had been one of the first to request formal relations with Earth. "Admiral," Kretal said, "may I ask you a personal question?" "Go ahead. Do you regret what you did to the Zephyrians? The complete destruction of their civilization?" Morrison stopped walking and looked directly at the alien. "Do you regret breathing? Do you regret eating when you're hungry? What we did to the Zephyrians was necessary for human survival. Regret doesn't enter into it. But surely you feel something about the deaths of billions of beings. I feel that they made a choice to commit genocide against my species. I feel that we responded appropriately. I feel that the galaxy is safer now that other civilizations understand the consequences of viewing humans as prey." Kretal was quiet for a moment. "You truly are different from other species." "Yes, we are. And that difference is why humanity will survive and prosper among the stars." Later that evening, Morrison stood on the observation deck of Luna Station, looking down at Earth. The planet hung in space like a blue and white jewel, peaceful and beautiful.